Hey friend, quick pause here. If you're finding these conversations helpful, I would love to stay connected beyond the podcast. You can sign up for my free newsletter at tabithawestbrook.com. And that's where I share exclusive trauma-informed insight, faith-friendly resources, and updates on new Hey Tabby episodes, retreats, healing tools, all kinds of good stuff that you will not find anywhere else. It's one small way to keep growing together toward peace, wholeness, and freedom. Just head over to tabithawestbrook.com and click on Hey Tabby, and you will scroll down and find the newsletter sign up there. I look forward to seeing you in the emails. Welcome to Hey Tabby, the podcast where we talk about the hard things out loud with our actual lips. We'll cover all kinds of topics across the mental health spectrum, including how it intersects with the Christian faith. Nothing is off limits here, and we are not take two verses and call me in the morning. I'm Tabitha Westbrook, and I'm a licensed trauma therapist, but I'm not your trauma therapist. I'm an expert in domestic abuse and coercive control, and how complex trauma impacts our health and well-being. Our focus here is knowledge and healing. Trauma doesn't have to eat your lunch forever. There is hope. Now, let's get going. Welcome to this week's episode of Hey Tabby, and I am super excited to be here with somebody who is a good friend of mine and who is an amazing person, and I want to tell you about her. Her name is Dawn Jones, and she is a lover of Jesus. She's the mother of 4 amazing kiddos and 1 awesome daughter-in-law. She's a grandmother to 2 sweet grandsons, which is super cool. I hear grandparenting is like even better, but we'll talk about that in a minute. She has a bachelor's and a master's in education from Baylor University. She taught in the public school system for several years and then moved into the private sector, and then eventually left all of that to be a full-time mom. She currently lives in Marble Falls, Texas, where she leads a ministry called Restored to Thrive at First Baptist Church of Marble Falls. Restored to Thrive is a ministry for women healing from relational trauma, including coercive, control, and abuse. And I am so excited. Welcome to the podcast, Dawn.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, and just thank you for having me. I'm honored. Can't wait to talk to you.
I am super stoked. This has been a long time coming. We're going to talk about some cool stuff that's happening like in your ministry and church in a second. But first, I have to ask, as someone who has gotten to grandmother age, because I mean, like really honestly, like we can be grandmother age at a variety of ages.
Yes.
So I feel like now that I have an adult child of my own, that I am grandmother age. What is it like to be a grandma?
It is amazing. So all the things that you hear people say, it's even better. And so all of us grandmas get together and we're like, do you think it's even better? And they're like, yes. So we get all the fun stuff, like less diapers. We get to sleep like full night. So it's amazing. I highly recommend it.
It's awesome. And you get to like love on these little humans.
Yes, yes.
That's so cool. And one day they'll become big humans.
Yes.
Which is fantastic.
Absolutely.
I love that so much. I think that's one of the fun things about like getting your children to adulthood is then they get married and have their own babies and stuff. And then you get to play with their babies and give them ice cream for breakfast and, you know, the things that grandparents do.
Yes. All the things, all the fun things for sure. Yes. I highly recommend it. You'll love it.
That's amazing. My son is 21, so we're probably a little ways away from it at the moment, but I am looking forward to it if it ever happens. When I said, hey, Dawn, you want to come on the podcast? You had talked about some really cool stuff at your church that had happened. And a lot of times, particularly on this podcast, we talk about where the church has maybe had some missteps or haven't done what we would hope that they would do in terms of caring well for those who've been through relational trauma like domestic abuse and coercive control. And your church is doing it well. And so I want to really highlight that. But even more than that, I want to highlight like what the fruit of the ministry is. So what happens for the victims who are now survivors, who are now overcomers, when they have a church that is supportive. So why don't you tell us about the ministry itself and how it came to be?
So like most people who do this work, my personal story dovetails with how the ministry started. So I'm very briefly going to give you some background. Met a guy in my late 20s, fell in love with him, saw red flags, thought I was going to love those red flags away. You know how that went. Went on the honeymoon and knew I was in trouble, like literally almost flew home and was like, is there a way to call this off? But I stayed for 23 more years. And so through that time, there were a lot of deception. There were a lot of destructive cycles. but we just kept on plugging along and you get used to it. Fast forward to 2020 and things just got unbearable. And so he went to go get some help. And then his going to counseling, you'll appreciate this, turned into, oh, he doesn't need to be in counseling. Y'all need to be in marriage counseling. So as a good Christian wife, I did that. And I am a huge proponent of counseling, had been in counseling many times, and this was very different. And actually, it was probably one of the most traumatic things that I've been through. And so I said, actually agreeing to go to marriage counseling was see if I say this in the right order, was the best, worst thing I did. It was the worst thing because it was traumatic, but it was the best thing because it started me on my healing journey. Even though those first steps felt like steps of rebellion, but I was just beside myself and I couldn't take it anymore. So I said, I'm not going to do marriage counseling anymore. I will find my own counselor and do my own work. And so we had separate counselors. We had a team. Our pastor was involved, so he got to see firsthand some of what we were going through. And so I started my journey hoping that, he would come alongside. That didn't happen. He took different avenues. And about a year and a half later, our marriage did end. But in that time of growth with my own counselor, I started looking, I think because I felt like I was going crazy, I started just searching for anything I could. And I found Leslie Vernick in her book, The Emotionally Destructive Marriage. And that was the first time that I read something. And I was like, maybe I'm not just rebellious. Maybe I'm not crazy. This is a thing. And some people, they find that and they can only take a little bit at a time. But I wasn't like, I think, again, because I was trying to convince my life, oh, here's evidence that I'm not crazy. So I just consumed everything that I could find. I took her Walking in Core Strength, and then I joined Conquer. But Conquer, I think it's still like that now. I'm not sure, but you could only join certain times of year. Mm-hmm. And so I waited to join Conquer. There was like a 2-week period where women could join, and you didn't just go in the in the big group. You went in like a little orientation group. So you could see exactly how many people had joined. And I remember by the end of that 2 weeks, there were hundreds of women that had joined in that 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So I really sat and my first thought was, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. This is a thing. And then as I processed more, I thought, what are so many of God's daughters doing here? This is not okay. And then as I continued on, got into Conquer and talked to other women, what I would hear over and over again was this story. I can't stay married anymore. It's unbearable. I can't get a divorce. So every night I pray for God to take my life. Oh, and I was like, no. Church, all of us. And that is what the daughters of God, our sisters, are praying. Absolutely something's wrong. So I think that's what kind of lit a fire in me. But I was still on my own journey and trying to learn and trying to heal. But I remember I went to our executive pastor and I said, hey, can I meet with you? And I said, I don't know what God's doing in my life right now, but I feel like he is eventually leading me to a ministry. I know I'm in the messy middle right now. I have no idea what that's going to look like. But at some point, if I continue working and God opens doors, is the church even open to having some type of ministry like this? And he said, yes, let's keep talking. So fast forward, I joined Equip. I did some training with Sarah McDougall, Psalm 82 initiative, and got a little bit of training under my belt. Plus, I live in a small town. We were very involved in the church, so I started having women coming out of the woodwork. Hey, let me tell you what's going on. Hey, can you help me? And so very informally, this is during the time Lisa Turkhurst was kind of walking out her story publicly. So there was a lot of information out that was kind of helpful for us also. So we just met individually and we would have a fellowship, maybe listen to a video. And they kept saying, we have to have a group. And I kept on saying, I'm not ready. And then finally God was like, look, I'm bringing people. I will make you ready. I set up a meeting with our senior pastor, executive pastor again, saying, okay, here's what I've done. And boy, I had all the books. I had all these things ready. So I went into a meeting with church leadership. I mean, everybody in there. I started on my spiel. I was maybe 2 minutes into it. And my pastor stopped me. And he said, Dawn, I want to stop you. we're going to listen and we will be here as long as you want. We want to hear what you have to say, but I want to say something right now. Yes. Yes, we want your ministry here. And so I kind of laughed, went on, did my thing. And it was funny. It may have been a year later. He said, "Do you know why I stopped you?" And I said, "No, not really." And he said, "Because it was very obvious you were not asking permission to do that ministry. You were saying, 'I am doing this ministry. Are you going to be part of it?'" And that's just the fire and the passion that God has given me for it. So in January of 2023, our first group met. We went through good boundaries and goodbyes together because that was kind of nice and safe for me to get my feet wet. And so we're starting year 4. And I kind of went back. This has been nice to reflect back and look on some things. So, and we can talk about that later. There's a lot of different things I do in this ministry, but it's sitting, and some is short term, some is long term. I've probably worked with about 40 women at this point, but I have a great church, an amazing pastor, leadership that's so supportive.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of Hey Tabby, and we will be right back to this episode. Here on Hey Tabby, we talk a lot about the hard stuff, trauma, abuse, and the toll that it takes on your mind, body, and spirit. And I want you to know you don't have to walk that alone. At The Journey in the Process, our team of highly trained trauma therapists help people heal from the deep wounds of complex trauma, all kinds of abuse, coercive control, sexual harm, and problematic sexual behaviors. We don't just manage symptoms. We work with your whole self, your mind, your body, and your spirit, using evidence-based approaches like EMDR, brain spotting, somatic experiencing, and internal family systems to help you find deep healing. Whether you're in North Carolina or Texas, we can meet with you in person or through secure telehealth sessions. We also have personalized intensives if you're in another area, and you can come to us in Texas or North Carolina and do that deep work over several days. Regardless of how we connect, we strive to make this a safe, judgment-free space where your story is heard, your pain is honored, and your healing is possible. If you're ready to take that next step toward peace, visit www.thejourneyandtheprocess.com, and we'll have that linked in the description as well. Trauma doesn't have to eat your lunch forever. There is hope, and we are here to help you find it. Now, let's get back to this week's episode. That is amazing. So I want to touch on a few of the things that you said in there. First of all, Leslie Vernick's book has been such a helpful tool for so many people to go, I am not crazy. And I think it's interesting. The first thing that stood out to me that you said was, I took my first steps and they felt like rebellion. When you were saying, I'm not doing this marriage counseling anymore, which our listeners know that marriage counseling is not appropriate when there's a destructive relationship, when there's abuse and coercive control present. And it feels though to somebody in the midst of it who wants to be a godly person, like they are rebelling to say no.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. I was at the point of just being beside myself that, and this is bad. I really thought, and I'm a people pleaser. I'm a recovering people pleaser. Let me say that. And so I was like, at this point, I don't care what other people say about me. And if I'm really honest, it was so bad that I was like, I don't know, God, you can strike me, but I can't take it. That was the level of just anguish.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's important for people to hear that, the other thing that you had said was there were people coming and saying, I don't feel like I'm allowed to get a divorce. So God, just kill me, take me out. Maybe I'll take myself out. And that is really important, I think, for church leaders to understand is this isn't a light, well, I'm not happy. It's not, I'm just not feeling the vibe, if you will. It's, I would rather be dead than keep doing this. And I guess I'm going to have to let God take me out. And that is heartbreaking. And you said, why are God's daughters saying this? And I think that's another important thing. So for folks, if you haven't listened to the episode with Leslie where we talk about the emotionally destructive marriage, I would just commend you to go back and listen to that one because it's really helpful in understanding that book and how it came to be. But it really has been one that for more than a decade now, women have picked up and found their sanity and found God in that, is something that I'll say. And for you, it was that way. You found your sanity in it a little bit, and God used it powerfully.
Absolutely. It was a game changer for me. I was just like, oh my gosh, even like, okay, I'm not just being rebellious and not going into counseling with them. There's a reason I'm really not supposed to be doing it. So, yes.
Yeah. And I would also commend to people the Core Strength and Conquer. They still exist and they are wonderful. And if you go to Leslie Vernick's website, which I will link in the show notes, then you can absolutely take advantage of those things. And it is powerful when you feel like the most alone person on the planet. And this is true of so many survivors of abuse, is I felt like I was the only one until you realize you're not the only one. And so to see hundreds of women had to have been so powerful and healing in a way.
Absolutely. And even just having our support group, sometimes the women say, this is the only thing that's helped me keep my sanity this week. Because you do see that you're not alone. And I left this part out. This was a crazy thing. When we started just informally meeting, so it started with a group, and then the next time would be, can I bring a friend? And so these, again, I live in a smaller community. So people would come in, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? Literally, one lady just told me, this was years ago. And she said, I remember walking into one of those and seeing someone and thinking, oh, she must be here to do a devotional because they are like the perfect Christian family. And I was just like devastated to find out she was there because she was going through the same thing. So there was a lot of that also.
Yeah. And I think like that's one of the hard parts of it is it's like hard and healing at the same time, right? And you mentioned Lisa Turkhurst, and that was one of the things that was disorienting for a lot of people who had followed her for years. Like, oh my goodness, what's happening? And in so many ways, it has helped set women free as well for her to publicly walk her journey, because they've heard that like it wasn't perfect and there were things behind the scenes. And how many of us who are survivors have had that exact experience where it's like, it looks pretty on the outside, but inside the four walls of home, it's a seventh level of Hades. And that is just the reality. So I think it's horrifying and healing are probably the right words when you are in a group like that going, why are there so many of us?
Yes. Well, the other thing is you speak a common language, because honestly, women can come in the group and say things and other people are like, yes, I get it. Then if you went into women's Bible study and said that, there'd be a variety of responses to that. But if you haven't walked through it, you really can't get it on the same level. Even if you're trained in it, like you can get it to a certain level. But there's just a freedom of being able to walk in and not only know you're not alone, but say like, these people, they get it. They understand.
Absolutely. And I think that's where real support groups are so valuable, whether they're in person, whether they're online, that it is oh, you have the same words I do, and the number of times I have heard women say, are we married to the same guy because the tactics are so similar? It's like, I mean, kind of, yeah, because Satan is fueling all of it, but it's really helpful. And yes, there can be wonderful people helpers who have gotten a lot of education, who are adept at helping people. But there is nothing like sitting in a group of survivors together who all are like, yeah, man, we get it. And they're in different spaces of their walk in recovery and all that sort of thing. It's one of the reasons that I love the Call to Peace Ministries retreat every year so much. I am a survivor. Our audience knows that about me. And to not only be with these wonderful women that I get to serve and love, but like, again, we have a sisterhood in a lot of ways because of the experiences that we've had. And that is a very powerful and healing space. Now, obviously, there can be communities that aren't healthy. That's not the topic of this particular episode, so we'll come back to that sometime. But when you have a really healthy, growing, and healing survivor community, it can be one of the most powerful things on the planet.
Absolutely. And can I share you about when our pastor actually came into our support group? With permission, we talked through, because I knew that could be really hard for some women, but we have amazing, amazing senior pastor. And so when someone comes into group, then they just sit and listen, and everybody gives, I call it the elevator speech for what happened to them. And then when it gets to the new person, if they want to share, then they, can, and if not, they don't have to. So I told the pastor, I said, well, we're going to treat you. You're a new person in the group. And we went around, and by the time we got to him, he just started crying. And he said, anything that I could say here would just be cheap. All I can say is, I'm so sorry. And he just wept with everyone. And that was such a powerful moment. And even to this day, the women still talk about that. And I love this because in preparation for this podcast, anybody that I might share anything about, even without a name, I got permission and said, are you okay with me sharing? So I went to him and I said, if I have the opportunity, I want to share that story. Is that okay? And I told him, because that's still powerful. That's one of the most powerful moments. And in his humility still, he said, I appreciate that. And he said, but those were the brave women to let not only a man come in there, but also a pastor who's a man. And so just know the things that happen in my ministry and in our church, that's the heart of leadership that brings that in. And that's so powerful.
Absolutely. And I think that is something that I commend to pastors to do regularly. I talked about this fairly recently on this podcast. That if you sit in those rooms, it will change you without question. And even in my own life as a survivor myself, sitting with other survivors and hearing their stories and hearing them in different communities and different spaces still changes me. And that, if I'm having that weight bear on me, then how much more so for the pastoral team, for the elders, for the leaders to see that and to sit with the grief and the pain and the horror of it all. And it really will change you, and you can't walk away the same.
Absolutely. And I think something is hard for pastors because sometimes like we can be frustrated or we can go in and be demanding. So my pastor and we have, I think it's a relationship of mutual respect. We both know, like, I know he may get some things wrong. He probably knows, I'm sure, that I will get some things wrong. So I've given him permission from the very beginning. Hey, if you hear that I've said something, even if you think I'm theologically wrong, please let's talk about it because, I'm learning, I'm not perfect. And then the same way he did a big series on relationships. And so I knew some of the topics, which he did a whole sermon on abuse, which was wonderful. But I knew some of the other things. I was like, oh, there's some things that are going to land differently for women that are in abusive situations. So I said, hey, can I sit down and just tell you how this may come across? And he said, absolutely. And I said, but I didn't tell him how to preach a sermon. I didn't make demands. So we have that mutual respect for each other, which I think is important. And in our coming out of hurt or trauma, we can tend to be maybe more demanding or it can come across wrong. So I think that's important too, to give grace both ways.
Absolutely. And that can be hard, I think, sometimes for survivors, because especially if the church has been part of your hurt and not part of the solution, that it can, especially if you go into a new faith community where you're like coming in guns blazing, armor on, and all that stuff because you're afraid, because you don't want to get hurt again. And that makes a lot of sense. But where you have a safe enough pastor and elder board and all of those things, depending on how your church is structured, to come in and say, can we talk, is really helpful, and for the listeners, if you're like, I am not there, I am not sure I can walk into a church, I can't even pick up my Bible, that's okay. You don't have to be. And that's where, like what the Lord has done in you is so helpful, Dawn. That is a place that he has given you. So at your church, do you have a Dawn, that can walk with you in that? Because you have that relationship. You are in a place where you're in a healed enough space, because we're never done healing, right? Like
Yes,
that happens.
absolutely. Preach.
But you're in a healed enough space where you can get into those places and say, hey, I can enter in a little bit more gently. And so sometimes if you're at the beginning of your journey and you're like, I want a church where my pastor hears me, then maybe you go with a friend who's able to help you regulate a little bit, or is a little more regulated, a little more healed, to have these conversations with the pastor so that you're not coming in guns blazing and armored up and all of those things, right? So that there can be a lot better conversation. So your pastor says yes to you and says, yes, we're going to start this ministry, and walk me through now what's happened since.
Well, it's amazing. And so I do several things. So we have the support group, and the way this support group is structured is it's on Wednesday nights when there's programming for children, for youth. The youth are already fed. I feed the moms and littles. The littles come in early and eat and go to their class. So the goal is that moms get 2 hours a week, that it's just focusing on them. And, there's times of fellowship, there's things that we learn. It changes each semester. But I also do one-on-one work. I love this. I think you will love it too. We have a Women in Crisis Fund. And so anybody that's working with me on any level, they can get free counseling from a list of approved counselors that are going to be helpful and not cause more issues for them and for their children. And so if they're doing group with me or one-on-one and working, I partner with counselors. That's amazing. And we see, boy, some amazing results from that. And so from that, and let me say this too. So we have women that come in, like it was a couple of months ago, somebody picked someone up off the streets and it was domestic violence related. A lot of times that's just connecting, like getting them stabilized, connecting them with resources, like where do they need to go? And some are there for a bit and maybe we plant a seed and they go on somewhere else. And then some are there long term. But some of the fruit that we're seeing come out of it is some of the women they're actually on church staff, or they're coming alongside and they're in a supportive position. Some are out just in the regular work world, just doing their thing. Some are working with ministries that are outside of the church. In fact, so for my group and the women that I work with, it's actually only a small percentage from my church also, which is interesting, but I love it because then they come in, they have the vocabulary for what's going on, and then they go talk to their pastors and share that other places. And so what I see overall, and this is the discussion that we have, is that women say, man, I was on fire. This is before they met their husbands. I was on fire for Jesus and I had all these things that I was doing. Maybe they were in choir, maybe it was a ministry, all different things. And then they got married and then it happens slowly, right? We don't realize then the shift goes from being like God and Jesus centered to husband centered and keeping him happy. And that starts to take all your energy and you give those things up, but you're struggling because you're trying to be a good wife too, right? We're supposed to keep our husbands happy. And so then part of that being restored is whenever they're on their healing journey, and that can look different ways. It can be, as Leslie Vernick says, that you're staying well, you're leaving well, or you're separating well. The focus is that you're well. But then when you're well, that you start moving that focus back to being God-centered and restoring your identity in Christ so that you can thrive. You go from surviving to thriving. So it can be something as little as, oh my gosh, I had to give up singing in the choir. I'll never forget one of the ladies, she was so excited to be back in choir. And one Sunday morning, I promise you, like she was radiating. And I was like, there was like light coming from her. It was amazing. And like I said, some are full-time ministries. One of the most exciting is one of the ladies came in, this was a couple of years ago, and I told you we feed the people. And she's like, I'm a professional chef. And so I said, if you want to, and that helps you, because, a lot of times there's a financial struggle, all these things, right, to try to gain stability. And I said, if you want to feed us, then I would rather pay you than Chick-fil-A or Schlotzsky's. I mean, I wasn't doing the cooking. And so she said, great. And so she still cooks for us to this day. And then she slowly built her business and she just came on staff and she's head of the Mission Center Cafe. We have a mission center, which is outreach based, and it just launched. It's in its baby stages, but oh my goodness, the amazing thing is that is going to be such an amazing ministry for our church, but also our community. I mean, she showed me like her mission statement. And again, that's in the mission center to bring in people from all over our community. So I think that's something we don't always focus on. We focus on how the church can help these women. But then when we help and we walk with them on that journey, then it comes back 1,000-fold in the things that they give back to our church and to our larger community. So it's been really exciting to see that.
I think that is such an amazing thing. And I want to highlight another couple things that I'm hearing. One is that there are really practical things that take place. So sometimes we hear about ministries and there's like the theological things like, yeah, we're going to walk with you. We'll love you. We'll pray for you. But you're feeding people, right? And you're giving childcare space where the kids are being met at their level. And so the kids can go to youth and the littles can go to another location and be cared for. And you're feeding them, which when there is financial control and financial insecurity, sometimes that is one of the biggest gifts, because how can you think if it's like, well, what am I going to do with my kids? And what am I going to do for dinner? And all of that is taken care of. And that is so incredibly loving and practical at the same time.
Sure. Absolutely. I'm like, hey, even if you just come for a free meal, show up. But free meal
Right.
and fellowship. And sometimes we do just have, tomorrow night, we're just going and having dinner. We're just having a fellowship.
I think that is so amazing. And that's the stuff where when churches go, well, what can we do? I mean, that's one of them. Can you feed people? Do you have the capacity to do that? Do you have the capacity to make it a safe space where, victims can come and bring their kids and get a meal and then have that space to learn to process and to start to heal and all of that? And I know there's some other practical things that the ministry does as well, including like clothing, and you said counseling and things like that, where you can like, hey, I can walk them right to this place where you've told me this in the past. I can walk them right here. And if they need clothes or if they need some of the more social services that the county offers, that you can help them get connected to that.
Yes. Okay. So 2 things that made me think of. The easiest thing that any church can do, if you have a person who's willing to do it, you don't think about some of these things till you're walking through them, because we were involved in our church. I'm a church girl. And so when we were going through our divorce, I did not demand that my husband leave the church because I thought I wanted him to be there and hopefully do healing. But I said, like, hey, you're going to go to this class. I'm going to go to this class. We're going to sit on different places. So we kind of had some boundaries with that. Well, okay. So then I walk in there and all of a sudden I'm the person that was there with a family, with a husband, that everybody's like, oh, look at that cute family. And now I'm by myself. I'm watching all the other families and boy, grief and all of the things. That was so hard. So I tell people, and not in a pushy way. I mean, if they want to come and be part of it, fine. If not, like, hey, this is where I sit every Sunday. I try not to miss, and you don't have to sit alone. And we go to, this is the other thing. You don't think about taking like the Lord's Supper, communion. Like, that's kind of a like, do I want to go take communion by myself? Which, okay, it should be more about that. I understand. But just practically enough and being honest, and you're seeing everybody else going and praying together. So just that. And the kind of the cool thing is, so some of us that sit together and do that, then other single women in our congregation sometimes say, hey, can we come and join you? So anybody can say, hey, here's a place to sit. So super simple. And then the other thing you were talking about, we have once a year, we have missions fair. And so that's our church ministries. There's ministries and things from all over the community. So the really cool thing that happened, because we do have a lot of ministries, and I'm like, all these ministries need to like be talking with each other and referring people. And so divorce care, the divorce care people. So they came in and said, this lady just came to us, but we know now what you do. She belongs with you because this is a whole different animal. So I've been helping her, but this is what I loved about divorce care. They didn't say like, I'll pass her off. They're like, oh, we're going to love on her. We're going to like say, you can sit with us. They invited her like for Christmas. They give her food. And so they're like, we're going to love on her, but we know this is where you need expertise. And it happened to be at that missions fair. And so we have all the community resources and we have a food pantry. So I could take her just in that room and introduce her to people. And so I'm all about resources and connecting people also.
That's such a vital thing. And churches tend to know when they're paying attention and they look for it, the local community leaders, right?
Yes.
And they know local resources and ministries. And to be able to say, hey, let me put in a call for you to XYZ, or, hey, here's where you go, because we know for some survivors, transportation is a problem. Finances are a problem. Housing is a problem. There is so much that goes into abuse that people don't think about, right? They think, well, hitting, punching, maybe they'll get to emotional abuse as being a problem. Hopefully they will if they listen to this podcast, but they don't think about like all the other pieces. And then it can feel like, how are we as the body of Christ supposed to meet this? And I'm like, well, I mean, there's a whole community that you can engage in and meet with and make partnerships with. So it isn't all just the church, but the church is a greater connector of people and community and all of that. And that's really what you guys are doing. And then knowing, I love that you said the ministries need to like talk to each other and know what everybody does, because you could have a marriage ministry. And if you don't know what to look for in terms of destruction or coercive control, you might be treating the wrong problem altogether. But if you know this is not okay, there's a pathway out. And what I would love to see at every church would be a men of peace type group that's for the destructive partner, and then a group like yours for the victim, and to say like, you're going to go over here and we're going to invite you to repentance, perpetrator of abuse and victim of abuse. We're going to take care of you and make sure the kids and you are good. And we're going to make sure that you have counseling if you need it and all those kinds of things. Right. And then if there are other underlying things, like potentially for the perpetrator with sex addiction, then do you have a pure desire group that they could enter into, and all of these things? And if you're all talking to each other and saying, here's how we help people and disciple them, because ultimately this is discipleship, then you're going to be in the very best place. But just not forgetting some of those practical things. I love what you said about sitting. That is such a hard thing. When you go from being the intact family to having your world explode, because that's very often how it feels and what happens for you, then you're like, well, how do I go to church? Because now I got to be by myself for everything. And you feel like someone has stamped a giant D for divorce on your body. And you're like, yeah, look at me. I'm all by myself. And that, we were created for community. Healing happens in community. We were created by a triune God that's already in community. So to say, sit with me, here's a safe place. And my church does that as well, where we have a women's abuse group, and they often sit together and they go do things together. And it is so beautiful to see that, because then people can come into a service and not be alone. And that's so hard when you have to feel like you're alone. So that is something that every church today could listen to and go, oh, do we have somebody here that would do that? And then do it.
Well, and the beautiful thing about that is, especially, we're about to start year 4, is because let's be honest, people are watching, right? And so then they're watching. So the church is watching these amazing transformations and these women loving on each other. And I'll tell you another practical thing. We have a group, it's Men at Work. And so some of the women that needed help moving out, they'll go help move. And some of our deacons and things are on it. So I'm going to tell you, they went to this, like they had all the trucks, all the things, went to move this lady. And she had a little, I think he was 4 months old at the time. And so they're like all ready. And then they bring out a load. Okay, where's the rest of your things? That's all I have. Oh, you think that didn't change them? And so then we had deacons' wives giving her clothes. And so again, it's so transformative, not only for the women, but it transforms the church. Again, over time, right? None of this is like in our microwave culture. It doesn't work that way. But that's what I think is so neat, is to watch the women transform, but to watch our church transform also.
Absolutely. And I think, for the senior pastors, the lead pastors that are listening, this starts with you. You are going to, even if it's an elder board led church, you are still going to be the loudest voice. And if you are on board and you say, we are going to have a safe enough church, we are going to care well for the oppressed, and you just start a few of these things, right? You start a space that's safe. You start, like, hey, maybe we could host a dinner, whatever that looks like, right? And you find and engage community partners, like you had said, Chick-fil-A and Schlotzsky's and stuff. A lot of times, and I used to do this like way back in the day when I had planted a church, I was the donut gatherer. And so I would go into Dunkin' and just say, hey, I'm with this church. Would you have any donuts that you want to donate? And we would get donations of donuts, and I would bring them to church. And so, those are things that, as you, again, build community partnerships, are going to be a good thing. where churches can get donations from community partners for food things, all that sort of stuff. And that's huge. My particular church has a really good relationship with Young Lives, which is for teens who have had babies, and they serve both the mother and the father so that everybody can be healthy. And there is like a baby donation store that our church runs. And the vape shop that is next to it was so impressed by all of the things that it was doing that they also have now on the counter in the vape shop a donation bucket for people to donate things to this ministry. And if you don't think, not only does it change the church, it changes the community, right? We have a vape shop now collecting donations for baby goods so that these families can have what they need. And so what else could a church do that would invite healing? And I can only imagine what it was like for those deacons to go, this is all you have. And to see the poverty that so often befalls victims of abuse and say, oh, we can do something about that.
Yes. Yeah, sometimes we make it way more complicated. And I will say this to churches also, even if they're like, this feels scary to me and I don't know where to start, something that I think works in tandem. So I also did Association of Christian Counselors, their certified mental health coach training. And in fact, we have lay counselors going through that. And I think that is such a good, just even foundation. And then they do, like Leslie Furnick has a course in there that's a great place to start. And then you could branch out, I love Call to Peace, their advocacy training. In fact, I'm about to go back through it again just because I want to soak it all up. And so even if you just start small, like I think it feels overwhelming if they're like, oh my gosh, and then how do we start this tomorrow? I mean, remember, we're in year 4. And there have been some missteps. I will tell you, one of them, we talked about Lisa Turkers. It was a little bit down the road and they kept on talking about the forgiveness. So I was like, well, we could, with some caveats, right? I'm like, we'll do forgiving what you can't forget, which sounded like a great idea. But at that time, a lot of what she was teaching, of course, it come out that she didn't, it didn't turn out the way that she was hoping. And so I found like the women were just bracing, they would like listen to the video, like, no, you don't know what's going to happen. And then I realized, oh my gosh, like this is traumatizing to the women. And I was like, hey, we're not going to do this anymore. So don't be afraid, like, to make missteps. Get some basic training and start small. And with me, I feel like I'm always running to keep up with God. If you have a willing heart and you love people well, he will show you the way.
Yeah. And I do think that's so important. Progress, not perfection in all of life and ministry is such an important thing, right? Because we might try something and it doesn't go well. And here's what makes the difference to survivors. Yeah, that didn't work. Sorry about that. Let's try something else, right?
Yes.
And I think that is something that I would hope that all pastors hold to heart is if you make a misstep in a ministry of any kind, to go, oh, we didn't realize that. Because that happens. We didn't realize it would look like this. We didn't realize it would have that impact, right? And the information in Lisa's book is probably fine, but it wasn't the right time for the group that you had.
Yes.
And so to go, hey, this isn't where we're supposed to be right now. We're going to reset. That is something that then all of the participants go, because they probably never had repair.
Yes.
They've probably never had anyone apologize. They've probably been told, actually, it's all your fault. In fact, it's all in your head. I don't know why you have a problem with this book, right? They've been gaslit. And so for ministries to go, yeah, that wasn't it.
Yeah.
And to do something a little bit different is actually healing. Repair can be so hugely healing.
Absolutely. I agree.
And I think that builds that relational equity too, right? And for people in the church to say, okay, like we're doing our best, and then watching people thrive. Like those are some of my favorite stories that I've heard from you over time of what the women are healing and then doing.
Oh, yes.
And not that our healing is overnight. It isn't. It takes a while. But as we heal, then we do pour that out. We pay it forward.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And that leads to a thriving church, a thriving community.
Yeah.
Right. I always say in my practice, we're changing the world one relationship at a time.
Yeah.
One relationship in counseling, one relationship in discipleship, one relationship in coaching. As people heal, then it impacts their families. So what kind of parents are these women to their children who've been traumatized? What kind of example and light are they to the rest of the world as they walk in whatever God has for them? Like, it's amazing.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because when I had the initial time that I met with the larger staff, I, which I don't know, I don't want to make this sound like it's a business model, because it's not. But I just said, okay, if I have 10 women in my group, and at that time they averaged 3 kids each, I'm like, so you have 10 women, and then also the men, which, and we know, and that's what we see also, like statistically, they kind of usually don't go on their healing journey. They kind of do something else. But again, so you have 10 women, 10 men, and then you have 3 kids each. Okay, that's like 50 people, right? I did my math right. That you have the chance to impact their lives. And that you're also making a generational change, and you're hopefully breaking cycles. And so I just think, for as much as there may be a fear there, or different reasons not to start, we don't realize the incredible impact that it can have. And we do know it. Okay, it is complex, it's complicated, it's messy. It can take you into some very dark places. But I love this. God actually just kind of gave me this morning, thinking about, I don't know if y'all did a candlelight service. I love candlelight services. And I don't know, this whole month we had kind of candles on the stage. And I was thinking about the beauty of the candlelight service is when all the lights are turned off, when it's dark. And it's not just one candle. When you look around and you see all of those candles, right? And so that's the church. When we look and everybody is shining their light and we're all doing it at the same time, and we're going into those dark spaces. Now, we could have had the candlelight services and said, we're not turning the lights off. We're just going to leave them on and look around. But it's not the same, right? So even though there's very dark spaces that we may be afraid to walk into, there's still the opportunity for the beauty also is amazing.
Absolutely. And the light has come into the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the thing to remember, right? Like, if you're a church listening to this, or if you're in church leadership listening to this, and I hope you are, I would encourage you, think about, what is one step I can take? If I've never taken any steps, if I'm just learning about this, or even if I have a little bit of awareness and I don't know what to do, what is one step I could take? Could we learn something? Could we maybe go through the Call to Peace training? Is there something that we could do? What is one step we could take to become a safe enough church and to help these people and ultimately help the community at the end of the day for generations, like you said, which I love. And so for churches, if you're like, I need to figure out what step that is, look, hit me up. I can connect you with Dawn. I can connect you with all kinds of people and resources that, can do that. My practice comes in and helps people with that. So we would be honored to walk with you and help you on this journey. You don't have to do it alone. Like, we don't want people healing alone. We don't want you walking into this journey alone. And there are organizations like Call to Peace, like my practice, like Peaceworks, that will help you on this journey and help you walk through, what is it that I need to do? What is my next right step for my church in my context? And you start from ground zero sometimes, or maybe even from ground 0.5 if you're like, at least I know I need to do something. Right. And we will walk with you. We will help you find the right people to walk with you. Dawn, as we close out here today, what would you say to churches and leaders that might be listening?
I would just say, just realize the opportunity that's there. And again, it's a lot of what you've already said. Just think, what is one small thing that I can do? And it doesn't have to be complicated. And there are resources. Reach out. So like you said, you don't have to do it alone. I would say, please don't do it alone. I don't do it alone. I work with a whole team of people. And so just be open and pray, and honestly follow the leading of the Holy Spirit. Sometimes we overcomplicate, right? We want, like, what is the secret sauce and all this? Like, just be open to the Holy Spirit and his leading, and God will open doors. He will open your eyes. That can be scary. Like, that may be it. Just the prayer of, like, open my eyes to things I might be missing. And because if you think about doing it all at the same time by yourself, it feels overwhelming. So just start.
Right. Just start. And that's, if you think about your ministries, that's how you started in the first place, right? Maybe I know when I planted a church, we started in somebody's donated townhouse. I was washing the little plastic communion cups because like we couldn't afford to buy new ones. So I had to like wash and sanitize them every week so that we could have communion. But, you know, we started with a thing, and you started your ministry with a tiny thing. It might have been a Bible study in a house. It might have been a small church plant, but it started small. You started your children's ministry probably with just a couple of classrooms. And this isn't any different. It's just a different topic. And so I love that. Start somewhere. And we are here to walk with you. We are happy to help you build your team out so that you aren't doing it alone. And Dawn, thank you so much for being on Hey Tabby. I am excited for the world to know you. I love you, and I know that they will as well.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. And I've already told you, like, I would like to just follow you around every day for a month or something, because you are such a great mix of wisdom and humor and knowledge. And so you're amazing. So it's an honor to get to be on your podcast.
Well, thank you for coming on. And thank you to everybody who listened this week. We will see you next time on Hey Tabby. Thanks for joining me for today's episode of Hey Tabby. If you're looking for a resource that I mentioned in the show and you want to check out the show notes, head on over to tabithawestbrook.com/Hey Tabby. That's HEYTABI, and you can grab it there. I look forward to seeing you next time. Hey friend, can I ask you something kind of personal? Have you ever wondered if healing your sexuality was even possible after everything you've been through? If you have, you're not alone. That is exactly why I wrote Body and Soul Healed and Whole, an invitational guide to healthy sexuality after trauma, abuse, and coercive control. This book is for every Christian woman who has been harmed sexually, whether that happened in childhood, adulthood, or even within your coercively controlling marriage, and you're longing to feel safe in your body again. We talk about the hard stuff: shame, desire, faith, and even questions like, is this sin or is this trauma? You don't have to untangle it alone. If you've ever wished for a guide that is honest, compassionate, and grounded in both scripture and trauma-informed care and does not spiritually bypass, Body and Soul Healed and Whole is for you. It's available now wherever books are sold. Go grab your copy today. You are so worth the healing.